The day I moved into riverfront residences, I became public enemy #1 in the entire community. It all started with my neighbor, the influencer sexy innocent Yvonne, who had over 1 million followers on TikTok. Right now, she was holding a phone stand right outside my door, crying her ass out, making people sympathize with her. Chat, I can't take it anymore. I thought there were only good people in this community, but it turns out there's a rat animal living here. Yvonne tugged at her collar, which was already as low as it could go, showing off loads of skin and some pretty shocking red marks on her neck. She pointed at my tightly shut door, yelling, "The man who lives in this apartment looks like a nice guy, but half an hour ago, he molested me in the elevator." He knew there was no signal in the elevator, so he not only verbally harassed me, he also pinned me to the wall. He used his hand to clamp my mouth shut, and with the other hand he tried to rip my dress. If the elevator door hadn't opened just in time, I would've. At this point, she seemed overwhelmed with emotion. She squatted down and started bawling. The livestream's viewer count skyrocketed to over 100,000. Comments flooded in, filled with outrage. What the heck? How can he be so brazen in broad daylight? Rich people like that are the worst. They think they can do whatever they want just because they have a bit of money. Call the police. You must report this. Lock that pervert up. The wife can't be any good either, letting her husband get away with this. She's just hiding inside like a coward. Outside, Yvonne's mother, Jenny Shaw, turned up too. This old lady could act even better than her daughter. She banged on the door and wailed into a megaphone, "Open up. You have the guts to do bad things but don't have the guts to open the door. Look, everyone, this is the animal living in Unit 2801. He harassed my daughter who just turned 20. What a scumbag. If you won't come out, I'll kill myself at your door." The nurse was giving me a headache. I put down the hot towel I was holding and looked at my husband, Chris Gomez, who was lying on the physiotherapy bed and hooked up to a breathing machine. Though he could not speak, his eyes were full of worry. He seemed to have heard the commotion outside and was trying hard to turn his head. I gently patted his shoulder and said softly, "It's alright, just a few barking dogs. I'll handle it." Chris's body trembled. A pang of sorrow hit me. 5 years ago, in that mall fire that shocked the whole country, he went in and out of the mall 3 times as the fire brigade captain. The last time, to save a trapped little girl, he was hit by a falling beam. It not only ruined his face but also took both his arms. For the past 5 years, we've been living a peaceful and comfortable life with the compensation money and the money I made from earlier investments to provide him with a better rehabilitation environment. I specifically moved to this large apartment with a river view. Who would have thought that on the very first day we moved in, we would be framed like this? My last pinned against the wall, hands all over. I smirked, my eyes turning cold. If they want to make a scene, then they better be ready for the consequences. I went to the entrance and swung the door open violently. The crying and shouting outside came to an abrupt halt. Yvonne did not expect me to open the door. She froze for a second, then shoved the camera in my face. "Chat, look, this is the pervert's wife. She finally shows herself." Jenny lunged at me like a mad dog, pointing at my face and shouting, "You shameless wench. Get your pervert husband out here. He touched my daughter. We won't let you off until you pay us $1 million for emotional trauma." Yvonne, sobbing, added, "Girl, you're a woman too. How can you protect your husband after what he did to me? Look at the marks on my neck. They're left by his fingers when he choked me." She stretched out her neck to give the camera a close-up shot. The red, swollen finger marks were clearly visible. "Look closely. This is evidence. This is undeniable proof of his wrongdoing." The neighbors pointed and stared, their eyes full of disgust. Seeing the girl's greedy and scheming face, I did not panic. Instead, I could not help but laugh. "Evidence, finger mark." I crossed my arms and looked down at the pair of clowns. "Your name's Yvonne, right? You're saying my husband choked you and ripped your clothes with his hands?" Yvonne straightened up and said with unwavering confidence, "That's right. His hands were shockingly strong and covered in calluses. They hurt so much. I'll never forget those hands." "Good." I nodded, a glint of coldness in my eyes. "Hopefully, when we get to court, you'll still remember what those hands look like, because my husband lost his hands in a fire 5 years ago." "You said he choked you. With what?" "His imaginary hands." Hearing my mockery, Yvonne's expression froze, but only for a moment. The next second, she acted like she had heard the funniest joke ever and shouted even louder into the camera, "Guys, listen to this." As expected of a pervert family member, to defend the rapist, she's cursing her own husband to not have hands. "Are you saying I was fighting with a ghost in the elevator?" Jenny spat on the ground. "Tui, shameless, making up lies to dodge responsibilities. I saw him downstairs with my own eyes. Your husband was wearing black. He had his hands in his pockets when he entered the elevator. How can he not have hands?" I laughed instead of getting angry, leaning against the door to watch their performance. "Oh, you saw him with his hands in his pocket. Of course, Jenny said confidently. Both hands were in his pocket. Quit acting like he's disabled. Yvonne held back, crying to the police. That's right, the local police had arrived. Officer, don't listen to that woman's lies. That man was so strong back in the elevator. She gestured wildly, sobbing as she described the details. His palms were so rough. His fingers were full of calluses. It hurt so much when the calluses scratched my face, and his left hand was especially strong. When it grabbed the back of my neck, I felt like my bones were gonna break. I fought back desperately and managed to scratch the back of his hand. There must be my fingernail marks on the back of his right hand. That's the proof. The police officer frowned as he took note. When he looked at me, his gaze was laced with suspicion. Ma'am, please ask your husband, Chris Gomez, to come out and assist with the investigation. We can find out the truth by just inspecting the injury. I stood in the doorway, not budging. Officer, my husband's physical condition is a little unusual. He's undergoing steroid treatment so he can't be exposed to the outside air or be stimulated right now. You can investigate, but I request a lawyer to be present. And I coldly swept my eyes over Yvonne and her mother. I want the entire questioning process to be recorded with a body cam. You're guilty. You're feeling guilty, Yvonne screamed while pointing at me. You're afraid the officer will see the scratches on the back of his hand, aren't you? Looking at Yvonne's face that was twisted with excitement, the last bit of sympathy I had disappeared. If I just let them go inside to have a look, this farce would be over. But they were too greedy, too eager to solidify the molestation charge, and too desperate for the so-called emotional trauma compensation.